Our reading this morning is from the Reverend William Ellery Channing. He writes, "What do I mean by love when I thus speak? Do I mean a constitutional tenderness, an instructive sympathy, the natural and almost necessary attachment to friends and benefactors, the kindness which is inseparable from our social state and which is never wholly extinguished in the human breast? In all of these emotions of our nature, I see the kind design of God. I see a beauty. I see the germ and capacity of an ever-growing charity. But they are not virtues. The love, the benevolence of which I honor as a virtue is not the gift of nature or condition, but the growth and manifestation of the soul's moral power. It is the spirit chosen as excellence, cherished as divine, protected with a jealous care, and especially fortified by the resistance and subjection of opposite propensities. It is the soul determining itself to break every chain of selfishness, to enlarge and invigorate the kind affections, to identify itself with other beings, to sympathize not with a few, but with all living rational children of God, to honor others' worth, to increase and enjoy their happiness, to partake in the universal goodness of the Creator." So the quote at the top of your order of service is by Brene Brown. She writes, "Empathy is not finite, and compassion is not a pizza with 8 slices. When we practice empathy and compassion with someone, there is not less of these qualities to go around. There's more. Love is the last thing we need to ration in this world. The refugee in Syria doesn't benefit more if you conserve your kindness only for her and withhold it from your neighbor who is going through a divorce." How many of you know the story of the giving tree? A few of you. So this story has a bad reputation in UU circles. For those of you who don't know this story, this is a story about a young boy and an apple tree, and the boy goes to the apple tree, and the tree offers its apples, and then it offers its shade, and then it offers its bark so he can carve in the letters of his loved one on the tree, and he goes back and he says to the tree, "Now I need to build a house. Can I have your branches?" And the tree says, "Sure," so he cuts the tree down. And then he goes back, and now he sits on the stump that's left of the tree. So the tree is given everything, all of its existence, to this young boy. And in UU circles, we see this as an unboundaried relationship, right? Like, you must have boundaries, because wouldn't a better story be the boy has children, and the boy's children then can climb in the tree and eat the apples and share in the same way that the father did? But this isn't a story about that. This is a story about sacrificial love. And that's something that we sometimes have a little trouble with as Unitarian Universalists. But I want to put that notion of sacrificial love in opposition to the statement that Elon Musk made a number of months ago, about a month ago, I guess. This notion of empathy as the destruction of Western civilization. And he uses that frame because he basically says we have this idea of what he calls suicidal empathy. So in his framework, the tree engaged in suicidal empathy. It literally gave up its life for this young man to go and be able to build a house for his family. In another framing, that is sacrificial love. It's the story of Jesus. It's the story of someone giving everything for the world. This story of sacrificial love is a story that I think is really important, especially as we're sitting here on Mother's Day, with this notion that unconditional love is the thing that we strive for. It's the thing that we believe, those of us who believe in God, or those of you who believe in God, unconditional love is the thing that God grants, all of us, all the time, always. And as Universalists, that's a core belief of our theology. A love so great, it transcends itself. The Buddhist Metta Sutra says, even as a mother protects her child, her only child, so with boundless heart shall one cherish all living beings. This idea that we are all interconnected, that we are all deeply interdependent on one another, is a vital understanding for our theology, for our survival as human beings on this planet. When I think about my own growing up in my own family, I know my parents sacrificed a lot for us to be able to have what we wanted and needed. And I know as a parent raising my son, we made sacrifices to make sure that he could have the things he needed to be able to thrive in the world. And that's what parents do. We make sacrifices for our children. We make sacrifices so that their world can be better. Think of the immigrant who's walked 500 miles across the desert. They didn't do it because they thought it would be a nice thing to do. When you walk 500 miles across a desert, you do it because you believe there's something better on the other side. A life for your children that's better than where you came from. It's what we do as human beings, as parents, to give our children a better education, a better opportunity, a better life. And we care about them because we care about people. Empathy is the action of understanding, being aware of, and being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings of another. It's stepping into another's shoes and walking a mile in those shoes. Empathy is a gift because it helps us understand what it's like to be in someone else's position. Empathy prevents us from being so selfish. Empathy permits us an opportunity to understand what someone else's life might be like. How is this bad? How is this a threat to civilization? In every teaching I've ever read, it is empathy that is the core to how civilizations survive and thrive. Without it, I don't even like to think about what would happen without it. Well, we're seeing it. Empathy requires us to be vulnerable and open. And I know right now it feels hard to be vulnerable and open. But it's important for us to hold that space, to practice empathy, to model empathy. I've been doing restorative practices and restorative justice work for many years now. And one of the most amazing thing about circle work is when somebody comes in defensive and angry, and people create this space in the circle, and empathy is shared, and it's caught. And they experience the relationship in a new way, and the empathy is literally palpable in the circle, and it changes lives. What we find in these circles is that empathy can be taught, that it can be caught, that it is a gift, that it's something that we all have capacity for, even the neurodiverse among us. Love, that thing that Channing talked about, real love is never bad. He writes, "The love, the benevolence which I honor as a virtue is not the gift of nature or condition, but the growth and manifestation of the soul's moral power. It is a spirit chosen as excellence, cherished as divine, protected with a jealous care, and especially fortified by the resistance and subjection of opposite propensities. We move into empathy because it makes us feel better. We move into empathy because it improves our lives, because it moves us closer to enlightenment, because it makes the world a better place." It's an aspiration, and not something we can do all the time. I spent all day Friday really, really angry about our healthcare system. I was not empathetic at all, especially to the poor women at the CVS. And I feel badly. And I still try. I had the opportunity to go to a teaching of the Dalai Lama a number of years ago at Lehigh University. And one of the things that he said was, we practice this because we get better at it as we practice it. And he said, no matter how good we get at it, we're never going to be 100%. Here's a guy who's been raised from the time he was 5, right, to be this enlightened teacher. He said he's good at this stuff about 70% of the time. That's amazing, 70% of the time. He said if we can do it 30% of the time, we're doing okay. So 30% of the time, if we can open our hearts to that empathetic place, if we can be present to those who are with us, if we can, in those moments of anger and frustration, find a place of calm, we can change the world. The New York Times had an article a few weeks ago. I don't know how many of you read the New York Times, but it's there. They had a significant longitudinal study that was done, I think, by Harvard University over 90 years. And it began as a study, believe it or not, on the qualities that would make a good manager for corporate entities. But the questions that they asked focused on satisfaction and happiness in many ways. It started in the 1930s, and 90 years later, they've been following those same group of people this whole time. It was a group of young white men who were asked a bunch of questions. They followed them, and at some point somebody said, maybe we should talk to their wives and ask them the same questions. So women were included in the process at some point. And then at some point, a small group of men of color were also included in this study. And what they learned in all of this is something any clergy person could have told them without wasting all that time and money in a matter of seconds. People are most satisfied and happy when they're helping other people. 90 years of study taught them that. This is the basis for restorative practices. It is the I-thou relationship. It's recognizing the divine in the other when we meet. It's not transactional. If it were transactional, I'd be treating you as a thing. But I don't want to treat you as a thing. I want to see your divinity. I want to see the sacredness in you. And so I treat you as thou, because I see myself reflected in you. When we do things together, rather than 4 people or 2 people, people feel better. We all feel more satisfied. We hold the world differently, more tenderly, with compassion and empathy. Some of you may be aware that we have a new pope. Thank you, whoever it was. Somebody mentioned the new pope. Who was that mentioned the pope? Thank you, Mimi. And I've read a little bit about this guy, because, you know, right, like new pope, who knows? I kind of like him, right? One thing I noticed in the early reporting about him is that he had an interaction with J.D. Vance. So if you know anything at all about the Catholic Church, you know that they're all about tradition. and they have priests who interpret the text for a reason. They don't actually want laity interpreting the text. They want to interpret the text and tell you what it says. So J.D. Vance engaged in reflection of the text, and the particular thing he's talking about is something called ordo amoris. And he said, this is his interpretation of ordo amoris. You love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your country. And then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. He went on to say, the far left has inverted that. Pope Leo said, this was before he was Pope, J.D. Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others. That's it. It's that simple. Jesus never said, nope, ignore the immigrant and pay attention to your spouse. Jesus never said that. Love is not pie. It is not a limited resource. There was a meme not long ago that went around on Facebook by the Rabbi Joachim Prince that said, neighbor is not a geographic term. It is a moral concept. When we are commanded to love our neighbor, we are not talking about the people that live next door. When we understand this is the case, that God commands that we love our neighbors as ourselves, perhaps we should think about what that might look like. Perhaps we should think about the fact that every single religious tradition on this planet seeks empathy and wisdom and clarity. Every religious tradition seeks a way for people to help and support one another, to create care for the least of us, the poor, the immigrants, those who are marginalized and cast out. This, apparently, is a countercultural notion these days. And that's deeply unfortunate. In all my years of ministry, it has never, ever been clearer to me than it is right now. All life is sacred. All beings have dignity and worth. No one has the right to limit our freedoms of expression to love and care for another. No one has the right to limit movement when war and famine and climate change force migration. No one has the right to limit movement of people in a war zone. These things are wrong, morally and ethically. They are untenable, and yet we seem to live in a world that is driven by a notion of cruelty and violence. Channing told us, the love, the benevolence which I honor as a virtue is not a gift of nature or condition, but the growth and manifestation of the soul's moral power. This is something we practice together. This is something we encourage in one another together. When Elon Musk's frames as suicidal empathy is, in its positive framing, sacrificial love, the kind of love that most religions teach us is what we should be striving for. It is in this way that we find our own humanity in ourselves and in others. It is the way that we find happiness and joy in this world, a world that was made for us that is just beautiful. And beauty is all around us. Here on this island, beauty is without bounds. The sparkling ocean, the bright blue skies, the flora, the fauna, this community of care. Brene Brown says, love is the last thing we need to ration in this world. Love lies at the center of everything. It is the alpha and the omega. It is something to which we all must aspire, even when we fall short, even when we leave the path, even when we break our vows. For whatever reason, love is always there, waiting for us Love is shared in song and story and witness. Stories are the breath and the word of the Spirit of life, that power that we name love. Come, let us share our stories. Let us heal one another, and together we can heal the world. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. And I invite you now to join in hymn number 6, which I hope you know, just as long as I have breath. Closing words are by Octavia Butler. She writes, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change."
Just to thank Reverend Paul, we have a cake, and before it gets cut, Reverend Paul should look at the inscription. Yes. Please join us for refreshments.